There was only one player to go undefeated through 8 rounds of grueling classic constructed games at ProTour Baltimore. You may know him from his recent battle-hardened Richmond top 8, from Carolina's Twitter posts, his max rarity dash deck, or his recent rampage with Lexi. That's right, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Matt McInnis from Team Magnolia. Light it up, my Lexi fans, because man, we've just gone so far off script that I'm not even sure it's a Livewire channel anymore, but I'm really stoked to have a good friend finally on the channel here, and that is Matt McInnis, the only player to go 8-0, undefeated across every single CC round at the most recent Pro Tour Baltimore. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. I'm just really excited to talk about the deck.
Yeah, and I mean, it's Lexi, right? Which is a deck everyone at this point knows is probably the best deck in the room, but you were really the only person to pilot it. Can't say perfectly, but 8-0 is a perfect CC record, right? So we're really going to try to dig into that today and hopefully have you share the sauce with us as how you pilot a deck this perfectly. But before we get into that, how do people potentially know you in the Flesh and Blood scene?
Yeah, so on Twitter a lot, I post about my dash deck. I have a max rarity dash deck. Almost. I'm missing a card or two. I'm a big dash simp, but I'm also a pro player for Team Magnolia, and I just love playing Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, I believe your tag on Twitter is still dash simp, so you need to change that because Lexi's been your girl, man. She's the one giving you results. Just saying.
Nah, I'm never gonna give up on Dash. One day I'll win a PT with her. One day.
One day. Well, next on the menu is calling Antwerp. So, are you gonna be playing Lexi or Dash on that one? What do you think?
Probably gonna be playing Lexi. I think I'm one of the only Americans going over, but I'm really excited. I think it should be a fun tournament.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into the list here so we can get a look at how your Lexi deck is performing so freaking well. So here we go. We're taking a look at the Lexi list, but gotta ask before we dive in here, why Lexi for this event? What really drew you to piloting this deck instead of your go-to Dash?
You know, honestly, right now, Dash just isn't good enough. Dash can't perform, and sometimes she just fatigues herself, where Lexi is just really strong. Still does all the above rate damage that Dash can sometimes do, but I don't have to keep milling through half my deck throughout the game to do it.
That's true. You start weighing pros and cons, and trust me, I do that a lot looking at Livewire and a deck like Lexi, and you start to wonder, my cards are a little bit overrate, no on-hit effects, but I have to juggle Blood Debt because of how overrate my cards are. But then you look at Lexi and the value of a 1-for-7 in Infecting Shot, or what Rain Razors can do, what Codex of Frailty can do with no real downside. It starts to get crazy. I feel you. But there's that first big decision point when building a Lexi deck, right? And that is to go either the fuse or the fuse-less route. And this list is fuseless, apart from just a little bit of spice in the Arctic Incarceration and Winter's Bite. But what really drew you to playing fuseless over a fuse list?
Yeah, I'd like to call it light ice is what I've called it, because there's just a little bit in there. It's just a lot stronger, I think. A lot of the decks that we expected to play at the Pro Tour were old hymns and Dromides that want to block out a bunch. So the ice on hits don't really matter if they're already okay blocking. You just want to go above rate and do a lot of damage and just kill your opponent.
Right. It's just about choosing damage over disruption. And it's crazy that a deck like Ranger actually deals enough damage to deal with Guardian right now. That you'd think that's kind of where the triangle lives. A deck that has no weapon should get beat by a deck that's pure defense. But Lexi does enough damage when you build it this way that's just not the case. Right. So this is a deck that you started building along with the rest of Team Magnolia. Right. And overall, how did your team end up on this deck at the Pro Tour?
We all ended up pretty close to each other. Thursday night, we're sitting in the hotel lobby, making our last few decisions, and I think we all ended up about 5 to 6 cards off, just choosing this is a 2 of, or this arrow is a 3 of, just some small differences. But for the most part, we were all pretty similar, and most of us had a pretty good run on the weekend, especially with my teammate Matt Folks top 8ing the Pro Tour, and my other teammate Matt W top 8ing the Calling.
Yeah, no, it was a great day for the Team Magnolia jerseys. They were everywhere. I was really happy to see Matt show up on a deck that he really had no reps in. What's actually the full story on his arc into top 8? Didn't he put in no testing or something, right?
He didn't have as much testing as most of us. He only had a few games coming into the weekend, and he just played the deck exceptionally well all weekend.
Yeah. But the difference maker then is, you went 8-0 in your CC rounds, but then, faltered in draft a bit. Do you know how he kind of balanced out? Was his CC record pretty strong? And I mean, I guess it had to be strong across both parts of the tournament, but
I think he went 6-2 in Classic Constructed, and he went 5-1 in his draft.
Wow. Yeah. Very well done. But yeah, that's a lot of really high stats for this deck performing in Classic Constructed. So let's take a look at the deck itself and how it was built here. We've got the equipment in front of us. Not a lot of equipment pieces, right? Just the 7 in total. What went into your decisions in picking these pieces?
Yeah. So to start out, Bullseye Bracer, Tunic, and New Horizon, and Voltaire. They're all very simple. Every Lexi deck's playing them. They're some of the most powerful equipment in the game right now, I believe. The Quiver was a very big talking point for us as a team. I was back and forth on even playing a Quiver in my deck at all. I kind of wanted the extra sideboard slot. But It came down to the decision that the Quiver of Wrestling Leaves was just an extra Bullseye Bracer sometime, which can just close out a game whenever you're on a Rainrazor's turn or a 3-of-a-kind Rainrazor's turn or just any of your big power turns.
It's got that extra line of text that honestly I overlooked when the Quiver came out here, but it only destroys itself if you actually get the arrow in Arsenal. So something I actually didn't even see play out till the Pro Tour itself, but how often did that come up? You're just kind of playing it blind and it didn't work, but it sticks around so you get a second go at it.
Actually, I believe every time I used it this weekend, I hit it because anytime I was using it, I was in my pitch deck and I just knew what my deck was. I did have one game against an Oldhim where I activated it twice, and I did find a Falcon Wing and a Remorseless to get 5 arrows in 1 turn.
That's pretty incredible, right? Because one of the tricks here is that you can hold priority before the resolution, right? That's what you're talking about, where you pay twice in, and you can actually fill the double slot thanks to New Horizon.
Yeah.
Wow, really cheeky. So the only actual sideboard slot you've got in between the equipment pieces here is Perch Grapplers and Snapdragons. And I remember when you had your amazing run at Battle Hardened Richmond, you did not run Perch Grapplers. And it was something that I tried to pick your brain after the fact because there were a bunch of CNCs that you were staring down that came in for 5, after a Codex of Frailty or something that I was thinking you would like to have Perch Grapplers for, Perch plus a 3-block. So how did your thinking on that change to really bring this card back in the list?
I still hate Perch Grapplers in this deck, but it ends up being really strong, not because of Command and Conquer, but because of dominated attacks. It really came in the deck for Bravo and Azalea. We were really worried about getting crushed too many times by Bravo, having dominated Red in the Ledgers played on us too many times, or just a Red in the Ledger for 5 that we're forced to give 2 cards on.
Oh, that's a great point, yeah.
We came down to the conclusion that one time in the game, in those matchups, plus our Lexi matchup, we can just use it to overblock something and start to regain tempo and claw our way back into the game, or to maintain our pressure that we have in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the end of the day, it helped you get to 8-0, so glad to see that it made its way back. I love block as a Livewire player. Just seeing 6 block on Husk is always amazing. So it was super puzzling. 2 block in a leg slot that, you're not really fighting to activate it ever, right? Does that ever come up, would you say, or it's literally just the block?
It came up sometimes in practice, but I don't believe I ever did it at the Pro Tour.
Sure. Okay. So apart from the 2 matchups, you said you're really just taking this equipment suite, the Bullseye, Tunic, New Horizon, Voltaire, Quiver, and Snaps. Is there a playline in particular that Snaps is really enabling? Is it the Endless Arrow, or just the flexibility is good enough?
It's the same thing that everybody's doing. We have a Rain Razors, we have an Endless Arrow, and we're just going to hit you for a bunch of damage in 1 turn.
Yeah.
The big combo turn.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can get really aggressive early on with Snapdragons, just setting up 2 arrows in Arsenal, and from your very first turn, going off on a 4-arrow turn. But you don't really like to do that because it can be a bit too risky sometimes.
That makes sense. Well, cool. That's the equipment here. Very light on equipment, performed really well. But the deck itself is what's really unique about your deck build here. So let's start taking a look from, red pitch down. Your deck on screen, kicking us off with a little bit of that ice spice, the Arctic Incarceration.
It's just a really strong card. It's sometimes can just be the same as the card Time Walk in Magic. You just play it and your opponent gets to do nothing, and you just take an extra turn because they're a Dromai with 2 red cards in hand, and they can't pay for anything because they have 3 or 4 Frostbites because of Lexi's hero power.
Right.
It's one of the strongest cards in the deck, I believe.
Do you often get into that bait game where you've got it like revealed in Arsenal, and if your opponent is fully blocking the 2 arrows you shot, then you just don't play Arctic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll just hold it over their head for several turns. If they want to keep giving me their hand, I don't need to play it. And if they want to try and hold stuff, well, then I'm going to hopefully blank their turn.
Right. I hate that piece of Arctic, the fact that New Horizon is letting it just sit there and not really clog your arsenal. It can be really hard to play around. There's so much agency the Lexi player has to use this to specifically screw a turn. So, I hate to see that you're running 2 of it, because some people go down to 1, much happier to just have to deal with the 1. Was the 2 of count like really for a certain reason, or?
Honestly, I got convinced of it pretty late in testing. I just wanted this deck to be really fluid and kill people, but we needed cards to tackle the Dromai matchup more. So I was on 1, I was on 2, and then I even tried 3 for a little bit, but I found 3 was too much. So we just settled on 2, because you only need it once a game, maybe twice a game, to just maintain your pressure.
Okay, well, speaking of the Dromai matchup, it looks like you've got an extra bit of poppers in the list here. Obviously, Battering Bolt, not just an arrow. The fact that it's base 6 helps a ton for trading with a Dromai. You can pop with it. So you've got these alongside a Down and Dirty. Are they really just coming in for Dromai, or what's the flexibility of these cards?
These cards are only for Dromai. My poppers, I don't bring them in for anything else.
Okay.
My teammate Jacob was bringing 1 or 2 Battering Bolts in for Oldhim, but I didn't really like that. I didn't find the play patterns to be exceptionally well with it, so I just only kept them for Dromai.
Okay. And is the flexibility of Down and Dirty in Arsenal, does that really like clump how Lexi has to play that matchup, or it just works in? I'm not super familiar with like how your Arsenal plays in that matchup.
It works pretty well. Sometimes you just find it off a Ponder and you just got to put it face down in Arsenal. And if you have another card in your Arsenal, it could be a little awkward, but with the beauty of Ponders, you don't have to Arsenal always.
Right.
And sometimes whenever you find it off that Ponder, you get to just pop their dragon and surprise, gain a bunch of tempo in the game, and you just get to go back to your turn and just fire an entire hand at them.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the worst feel bad moments. A random draw just somehow is a popper in Arsenal that just ends a Dromai's turn. Oh god. But okay, moving on. You've got a bunch of play sets we're looking at now. Bolt and Shot, obviously amazing card in Lexi. You can always give it +1 on Voltaire, and then it's threatening go again. Sometimes that reload is a huge mind game for your opponent as well. If you've got like a Rain Razors and Arsenal, like they're just going to pump the bolt and they're just going to reload and make it a potentially like 4-arrow turn. It's crazy. Would you ever not run 9?
No, I don't think I would. This card is absolutely broken, and I think it should have been banned at the last ban announcement. Honestly, I talked about it on Twitter a little bit. It's just so above rate with Voltaire as your bow.
Right. That's a great point. Voltaire as your bow specifically just really unlocks what this card's doing. When you see it in Azalea, you're like, okay, they might shoot 2 arrows this turn. That's cool. When you see it in Lexi, it's part of what's helping enable the fact that Rain Razors can get pumped up to like 8-10 value, which is just insane for a singular card that like you're going to run anyway.
It's absurdly strong.
Absurd.
I think one time over the weekend I had it for 12. Like it can scale so high.
A Rain Razors
the
for
largest
12.
ceiling.
Oh god. Yeah, how does Livewire compete? She's just numbers. There's not a single 1 card 12 in the freaking deck. All right. Crazy. But you've also got then the 6 Drill Shot, which is something I've seen people play with, either running the blues or not. I kind of figured with like Boulder Trap coming out, maybe you stopped running blues to be that little extra prod against like a Rampart. How did you really end up on the blues here?
I settled pretty early on that Drill Shot's super strong. A lot of people see it as like, I have to play these to kill a Rampart, but I don't think you actually do. I think it's actually best suited for the aggro matchups. You want to force armor out of your opponents in the aggro matchups so that later in the game, they have to give you cards from their hand to stop your on hits, such as Endless Arrow or Hamstring Shots and other arrows like that.
That makes so much sense, actually. That's huge because it's something that has become really punishing playing into Alexi. You almost have to give your armor early because drill shots will just come, and holding armor just doesn't work out with all the like 5 hit effects. That's what you want to use it for, but drill shot really punishes that. So moving to the next column of just delicious red arrows you've got here, kind of give us the breakdown on a bunch of these reds.
Yeah, so Endless Arrow, everyone I think by now knows how insanely broken this card is in Lexi. It's essentially snatch, but you're drawing a 0 for 4 3 block, which is drawing another one and drawing another one, and that card can truly be endless sometimes. Falcon Wing is super strong. I think this was one of the standout cards when we were looking at Lexi, and it's one of the reasons that I actually settled on Lexi. It's just a head jab. Unless you get to load it, then it's a 1 for 4 with go again. But it has a lot of the play patterns where you just get to arsenal it at the end of your turn, or you can load it really early and have 3 and 4 arrow turns without having to use your Snapdragon Scalers at all.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful card. The amount of times that I just see this be that enabler that pushes, like we already talked about, Rain Razors to just that extra piece of value. An extra go again arrow is, it's crazy. It's crazy good. And I didn't see it slotting in too early in the Lexi list, but to see you on 3 here kind of that confirms my fears of how good this card was. Yeah.
Fatigue Shot and Hamstring Shot actually both kind of serve the same purpose.
Okay.
Disruption against Guardians. Anytime that you have turns where you're swinging 2 or 3 arrows, Oldhams might want to hold an Endless Winner and a blue while their Tunics at 3 resources so that they can just play a 2-card Endless Winner at you. But these Fatigue Shots and Hamstring Shots can stop them from doing that, because if they take 1 bit of damage on the Hamstring Shot, they can no longer play that Endless Winner, because they have to pay 5 for it now. Or the Fatigue Shot just cuts it right in half so that you can just easily cover it up and still maintain all the tempo that you have.
Yeah, that's a great point. Fatigue Shot in particular, a lot of the some gameplay I've seen where Fatigue Shot comes up, the fact that it only rounds down the base means it doesn't play well into like every deck, but a Guardian, like you just pointed out, that's going for like the singular tall attack really gets hampered by this. And you don't hate the fact that it's a 1 for 5 anyway. Like it's not compromising anything for the rate for this amazing hit effect. But then Hamstring Shot is something a bunch of people have been starting to experiment with now. Doesn't it also help the Dromai matchup? Isn't that something the little 1 extra tax can kind of help shore up? Yeah.
So I started looking at Hamstring Shot about 2 weeks beforehand. I was looking at the list that made second place at the Auckland Calling before Outsiders came out.
Oh, Deagle.
And it was it was an Ice Lexi list. But I saw them talking about Hamstring Shot. And I thought more and more about it, and I was like, this just gets to do what the Fuse deck wants to do without having to fuse. And so quite often into Dromai, I found, this is just a Frostbite. If they want to block with 3 cards that hold a Sigil or a Ravenous Rabble to go again, they don't get to do that anymore. They're forced to hold 2 cards or give up that last card and not attack with their plethora of dragons. And it can almost be like a popper in the sense that you're not getting hit by all their dragons. And it can just start to snowball and gain you more tempo in that matchup.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah, because it's really buying a whole turn cycle of life buffer, especially if you're just trying to burn them down going face. Is that normally how you approach the Dromai matchup, actually? Like, are you on Dragon Clear duty, or because of what Hamstring Shot can do to save life, are you teched enough to just always go face?
It definitely depends what Dromai you're against. If I'm against an Empress Dromai like Mara Ferris's deck, I think I can out-aggro them pretty well because they don't play as many dragons. They play a lot of attacks that I can value trade well with, where the control decks that are just trying to build a board more, I don't want to clear dragons as much, but I'll do it when I have to. That's what the Falcon Wings are for, or as we'll see soon, the Lightning Surges. But definitely Endless Arrow. I just want to abuse an Endless Arrow and clear their Mira guys, clear their Kylorias, and Chromize with that as much as I can.
Makes a lot of sense. And then we've got Heatseeker, one of the Majestics coming from Dynasty. This card, for as someone who plays against Ranger constantly, this is just the most headache card because it's so hard to know what amount of value they're going to get off the top. But with the way that Lexi decks are built nowadays, it almost doesn't matter what they're going to pull off the top. Like the worst hit is just a blue arrow, right? But everything else just unlocks baseline a really good 3 arrow turn out of the Lexi. I feel like this hit effect it's like that tipping point that just makes Lexi have that just a little too much that you need to block. Does it really feel as a Lexi player that oppressive, or am I wrong here?
It's a really strong arrow. I'll say this about several cards in this deck. It's practically like a snatch. It kind of just draws you a card when I'm playing my cards from Arsenal all the time. There's some nuanced niche scenarios with Heatseeker that can make it very awkward and make you realize where it isn't as strong as it seems. But it definitely is a very strong card.
Right, because there can be the position where potentially your arsenals get like locked up if you already have like an arrow face down, right? Is where it can, or not face down. It'd have to be face up for New Horizon. But it definitely, you don't want to play a Heatseeker blindly. This is the kind of card that with reps you can really hit the highs with. But
yeah, into Dromai for a second. There's a lot of times where this arrow is very awkward in that matchup. A lot of the deck decisions were made for Dromai since I believe it's our only bad matchup. And one of the things I ended up doing this weekend, luckily I didn't play against any Dromais, but my sideboard was set.
Well, that's a secret to 8-0. Hold
up. My sideboard though was set to take out Heatseeker into Dromai because I was very horrified of them playing Tumultai and destroying my New Horizon, because this card becomes almost unplayable when you don't have your New Horizon.
Oh, that's a great point. Interesting. Well, it's not the end of the 1-for-5s. We've also got the red and blue of the Infecting Shot. Makes sense. It's one of the highest rate blues you can play. And it comes in at 1-for-7, right? Like what else can you say? This card is just a really good rate. But what did you think about the addition of Infecting Shot?
I think this card's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I think Blood Rot Poxes actually should be worded differently. I think they're way too strong. Because while it's a 1-for-7, you have to think about it with Voltaire quite often. So it's actually a 2-for-8. This is just swing big.
Wow.
But they don't get to get a quicken when they block it out.
Oh my God. That's a great way to put it. Man, everyone's just dogging on the brutes. I get it. We're not quite there yet. Hey, but someone made 35th with Rhinar, just saying. But cool. Now we're getting into some of the other spice of the deck. You've got 2 Lightning Surges. What does this card really unlock for Lexi, would you say?
I think this card's insane.
Everything's insane.
I think everything in this deck's insane. But Lightning Surge has a lot of play patterns, especially with Codex of Frailty. Quite often, I will load an arrow face up and just arsenal a Lightning Surge. And those are the double arsenals where I'm pushing a lot of damage against Oldhim. Quite often, you can have turns where you load an Endless Arrow, arsenal a Lightning Surge, and draw into a Rain Razors or 2, and just get really abusive with that Endless Arrow, right? You flip up the Lightning Surge, you swing the Endless Arrow, you Rain Razors them, you Rain Razors it again, and then you get to just go off with that Endless Arrow, or multiple arrows even.
You know, what's crazy is that that's not even Magical Christmas Land. Lexi draws so much now, with the extra ponders, obviously baked in 3 of a kind, the Heatseeker hits. Like, you really do just see those power cards in sequence so freaking consistently. So speaking of the ponders, you've got not just these codexes we'll get to in a second. You also had to premeditate. A lot of Lexis don't really spice in a lot of the pumps. And I think other than Rain Razors, premeditate's only when you're running. Why premed instead of something like a bit more disruptive like a Icequake or Seek and Destroy?
Sure. So Icequake has an issue of being a 1-resource card.
Sure.
Which I really didn't like. That didn't play into the curve at all. When we're trying to play a 0-mana or a 0-resource arrow and then a 1-resource arrow, we need 2 resources for the Voltaire plus the 1 for that arrow, so it doesn't play as efficiently. We were really just looking at 0-resource pumps. Premeditate, Lace with Blood Rot, Lace with Inertia, Lace with Frailty, and Seek and Destroy. At Richmond, I was on Lace with Blood Rot.
Yeah.
I still think that card's very strong. But I think the list was so tight, I ended up settling on not playing them and bringing in the premeditates this time around. Drawing all the cards and churning through your deck and seeing every powerful card is so good. Drawing cards in card games is good, evidently. And so the more you can do it, the more you're winning.
Who'd have thought? Oh, hey, it's not true card draw. You're pondering, all right? It sounds, it's way more pensive. There's so much thought put into these cards you're drawing, but it's just damage at the end of the day in a Lexi deck, truly. You've got then Remorseless, which to note here, Remorseless is a card we've seen flitting in and out of these Lexi decks. I think Yuki, actually, Yuki Lee Bender, prominent Lexi player, she posted her deck list and was not running Remorseless in her Fuseless list. So why did you keep it in? Like, what part of the text box is really making it worth keeping in?
I think the text box about taking a bunch of life after you take it is insanely strong.
Makes sense.
In against Lexi and against Azalea, this card is sometimes like a 1 for 10 or a 2 for 11 with Voltaire, right? That's insanely strong.
Mm.
It's just like every time they play a pump in Azalea, they lose a life. Every time that a 3 of a kind and then an arrow and then an arrow and an arrow's played and then a codex and then the arrow off the codex. Like I had a Remorseless this weekend do 12 damage in total because they lost 7 life off of it. This card is so insanely strong. I think it's the most above rate arrow, and there's a reason that its dollar price is where it's at.
Oh, see, I don't even know. I got my white borders when they were still cheap, so I don't think about it. But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's really just, it's about damage. That's your win con with this deck. And as you pointed out, specifically with Codex, that's not playing a singular card. That's committing to playing 2 cards. That's an extra tick on Remorseless. I think there's a lot in the game right now with cycling, with replaying, that Remorseless does add up for. Obviously did you well this weekend. All right, let's keep it moving. We got Searing Shots. What is there to say? It's about damage, right?
Yep.
Cool.
It's above rate. It's a 0 for 4 that becomes a 0 for 5 or a 0 for 6 when you +1 it. Insanely strong.
Disgusting rates, Ranger. Why do you get all the good stuff? Speaking of the good stuff, though, 3 of a kind, incredible card. I heard a lot of musings this weekend about potentially this being the ban list hit. Didn't happen, right? Nothing happened with the ban list. You've already claimed Bolt & Shot might have been the real card to touch. What do you think about 3 of a kind existing for Lexi, though? Obviously an insane card. What would happen if it went away?
I think Lexi would just go in the bin. Really? I think this card is absolutely pivotal to the class existing, right? If we look at every class has some card that's pushed really hard to make it really good. Dash has Spark of Genius and Teklo Cores. Brutes have Swing Big, which is just a very above rate attack.
We get one. No, we have Blue Wrecker Romp, guys. The most insane card. All right.
It's a blue 6. What do you mean? One more blue 6 breaks Brute. But like every class just has its 1 to 2 cards that are really pushed. But Ranger with this last set has just a couple too many that pushed is the issue with it. I think I would have rather seen Rain Razors get banned if we had seen 3 of a kind, but I don't think either of them should have been. Earlier I said Arctic Incarceration's akin to Time Walk. 3 of a kind is literally just Ancestral Empowerment. Or not Ancestral Empowerment, Ancestral Recall. And why would I not play 2 of the most broken cards ever put in card games in my deck?
I don't come from Magic, but I can vouch for their power in Fab. I groan every time you see a 3 of a kind because it just means you're that much closer to finding your next power card and your next. And I think that's what is becoming a little frustrating with Ranger. As you said, a lot of their cards carry so much value. The card draw, especially with like Ponder now in their toolkit as well, just makes them see things so quickly, so in sequence that, you know, as a Rhinar player at this last Pro Tour, I could face Alexi and see 0 Blood Rush. And meanwhile, they have played a 3 of a kind into Rain Razors, into Frailty, into 3 of a kind. Like everything just helps them find the next. And it does start to feel like a lot. But by them not banning it, Lexi will live to see another day. And hey, maybe you'll win Calling Antwerp with her. So with some of the last power cards that we see across here, there's the last arrow to talk about, which is Withering Shot. And this is kind of the more interesting count in your list here. You've got 1 red, 2 blue. Why? Yeah,
so Thursday night, I was talking about how we were adjusting our ratio slightly, what arrows we wanted, and we came very quickly to the decision that it wouldn't be unreasonable to play against 6 Lexis in our 8 rounds of Classic Constructed. So I was like, all right, I just want cards that are good in the mirror matchup. I want cards that are going to make their arrows smaller so I could block on hits more efficiently or take less damage. So I settled on 1 red Withering Shot as a Frailty target, and I believe that it is as a Codex of Frailty target, and I believe that it is the best target for Codex of Frailty in the mirror.
Oh, that makes sense. Double up on Frailty is huge. Okay, I follow. Then we've got the double playset of Codex. Obviously, Codex Frailty, just an insane card. You were one of the people that was on Codex of Inertia kind of at the forefront of these new Lexi lists. You were playing it at Richmond, and every time I saw it, I was just grinning. It looked so strong the way you were playing it into a second cycle that you knew very well. What does it feel clunky to have both in, or why the 6 really?
Codex of Inertia is only for Oldham.
Okay.
A lot of people all weekend were playing it into everything. A friend of mine, Lucas Oswald, was playing it into everything and saying that it was just so strong. It's essentially draws an extra card after you play it because you get the card, you get the ponder, just like Codex of Frailty. But I didn't really like the gamble of that myself. I didn't like that play style. I wanted to be very concise and have knowledge about what my deck was doing whenever it was doing anything. So I only played them in Fatigue, and they're primarily for pitch stacking. But sometimes in the mid game against Oldhim, you can just play them to give them an inertia, set up your 6-card hand, and now they're off in Arsenal.
That makes a lot of sense. I would imagine, I mean, Icelander's not a huge presence right now, but just that inertia kicking in to get them off Arsenal would line up really well there too. Cool. So Rain Razors, Winter's Bite, both individually powerful cards. How would you describe Rain Razors in 3 words?
Overly broken card.
Okay, that's all we need to say. I totally agree. Winter's Bite, last card of the list.
I'll give you 3 words for this one. Blue Codex.
Blue Codex. Okay, I can see that because you are playing it, obviously from Arsenal, bit of disruption on the Frostbite, which always just helps a deck that's trading. But the fact that you could play it as, I play a card to neg you a card.
Yeah.
Very similar to Codex, sure.
Yeah. With Lexi Zero Power, a lot of the times, back to the draw my matchup, if I flip it up and I give them a Frostbite, that's a card out of their hand that they need to do whatever they want to do. And then I'm going to play it, and it's going to strip another card out of their hand, so I'm going to probably force through another 2 to 3 damage.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, that'll wrap. I mean, this is a super solid list. Going into calling Antwerp in just about like a week and a half, is there anything you're thinking you would change, or the meta's about where you'd expect, and this list is built for that meta, so it seems solid? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I might look at the other Quiver again, seeing if I want to bring in Quiver of Abyssal Depths at all as a second Quiver in the board. I'm still going to keep looking at changing arrows, tweaking things. Sometimes you want this, like 2 of an arrow, or 3 of an arrow, or only 1 of an arrow, and those numbers fluctuate all the time, especially whenever you're testing against everything.
Okay, very cool. Well, before we wrap this up here, we went through every card, and you talked a bit about like what's being brought in, brought out. Do you normally chase just like a clean 60 card list, or because of the card draw, you just want a little bit extra in there? Like how does the sideboarding process really go with this deck?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We are just trimming down to 60 against everything except for Oldhim.
Okay.
Oldhim, we were a little worried that, they can get us so low in deck that we only have our blues. So we're padding it with the extra reds and the codexes just to have more power into them and potentially be able to play a longer game.
Right. And when you mention the extra reds, you're talking about fatigue and hamstring?
Yeah. So the way that I structured my deck going into the weekend, Fatigue Shot is a sideboard card. And it comes in a few matchups where they're going to play big attacks against you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really come in for everything. And so that card comes in along with my not my poppers, but like my Codex of Inertias and just a few other small sideboard pieces.
Super cool. Well, as someone who doesn't play Lexi, but went ahead and hedged that she'd be pretty strong post-Dynasty, I did buy in, and I have everything to build this kind of deck. Super interested after talking with you. I think I'll probably give it a go, because at the end of the day, look, I play Brute because I like the big numbers, but this deck just kind of does big numbers better and does them wider, does them more consistently, and hey, it's flashy too. Lexi's looking pretty good. So cool. Before we really sign off, Matt, it's been a pleasure. Any last shout outs, any last plugs before we release this into the public?
Yeah, I definitely want to give a big shout out to Team Magnolia and Magnolia Gaming for being my sponsor. All my teammates, Matt W., Matt Folks, Jake Baugh, T. Tebow, Josh Keehee, Ed Knight, for helping me test for the ProTour, helping me test for everything coming up, and just being an amazing team. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to run into the Team Magnolia crew. And funny enough that, I'll be seeing you guys pretty soon. You and Matt Folks will be representing Team Magnolia at Antwerp. Anyone else?
I think it's just him and I.
Okay, sweet. Well, best of luck to the both of you there. And hey, thanks for joining me. I'll catch everyone in the next one.